They dropped me into the ice without a word. One moment I was shackled in that damn holding cell, cold steel against my wrists, the stench of alien antiseptics burning my nose. The next, the floor beneath me vanished, and I was falling through open air into a blizzard that could tear skin from bone. No explanation, no instructions, just the silence of execution masked as a test. The snow hit like fists. I slammed into a thick drift and lay there for a second. The wind howling like a monster in heat. My vision blurred, breath shallow. But I didn't scream. That's what they wanted. Panic, desperation. Not from me. I stood. The horizon was a graveyard of jagged ice and endless white. There was no sun, no moon, just the glow of artificial auroras flickering above. The bastards were watching from somewhere. Maybe orbit, maybe cloaked behind the storm, taking notes, placing bets. This was their idea of entertainment. They called it the hunt. I was the prey. Rumor was no human had ever lasted more than 4 hours in this simulation. No food, no weapons, no allies. And worse, every few miles, they'd unleash something bred to kill, something the other species in this galactic circus thought would show how fragile the human body really is. What they never understood was that fragile doesn't mean weak. I moved. Each step was a decision. The snow reached my thighs, and every muscle in my legs screamed from the cold. But I focused on the breath. One after the next. No thoughts of survival yet, just movement. That's how I'd lasted this long, before they caught me, before they sold me to the arena worlds for behavioral observation. They wanted a look at primitive endurance. They were about to see what primitive really meant. An hour in, I heard it. Metal scraping against ice. The first hunter. I didn't turn around. Not yet. The game was all about the illusion of control. They wanted me to think I had options. That I could fight. That maybe, just maybe, I could win. But they rigged it. They always did. The hunter crept closer. I knew its kind from the cells. 8 limbs, razors for fingers, a torso that opened up to show you the face of your mother, mimicked from brain scans just to throw you off. I paused. My knuckles were already blue. My shirt was wet and stiff. I had no weapons, just my body. And it wasn't even the storm that would kill me. It was the memory of every bastard who sold me out back home. Earth was no sanctuary. It was the place that handed me over. So I turned, and I smiled. The creature stopped, like it didn't understand. It tilted its head. Maybe they programmed it to expect fear. Maybe they never taught it what rage looked like on a starving man's face. I broke into a sprint, straight into the thing. Pain doesn't register in the cold the same way. My shoulder cracked as I hit it, and I think it sliced open my side. But I didn't stop. I grabbed its middle leg and twisted until I heard the pop, then drove my elbow into the sensory core, the glowing thing pulsing beneath its ribs. I don't remember screaming. I just remember the warmth of black alien blood spilling on my frozen hands. The thing collapsed, twitching. Dead. I stood over it, chest heaving, heart steady. Then I looked at the nearest drone, hovering above, red eye blinking, recording, and I raised both middle fingers to the sky. You watching this? Freaks! I shouted into the storm. I'm still standing. Snow blasted across my face. Ice burned my throat. Somewhere far away, metal doors were opening again. Another hunter, a worse one this time. I wiped the blood from my face with a frozen hand. I wasn't walking out of this simulation. I was going to conquer it. I used to think pain had limits. Turns out it doesn't. The body doesn't shut down when it should. It stretches, bends, breaks, then keeps moving. Not because it's strong, but because the brain hasn't caught up with the suffering yet. That's what I learned in the next 2 hours. After I killed the first hunter, the storm changed. I don't mean the temperature dropped. It shifted. The snow no longer blew in wild, random bursts. It moved in synchronized spirals, like something alive, something watching. I knew it then. The simulation was adapting. This wasn't some pre-programmed death trap. This was personal now. They'd seen me kill one of their creations with nothing but bare hands, frostbitten fingers, and anger. They didn't like that. So they started pushing back. The wind roared louder, my eyes stung, the skin around my lips cracked and bled. Every time I opened my mouth to breathe, the cold cut into my lungs like knives. And still, I walked. They didn't give us maps. No direction. Just endless, freezing hell. My boots were soaked through. Every toe felt like it was dying. I couldn't feel my right hand anymore, but the adrenaline kept me going. It always does, until it doesn't. I knew I was on borrowed time. Then I heard it. Deep, heavy thuds. Not metallic like the first one. This was weight-hitting snow with controlled force. Deliberate. Measured. The second hunter. I dropped to one knee and pressed my ear to the ice. You learn that in the underground cities. If you listen close enough, you can feel weight before you see it. This thing was big. Bigger than the last one, not fast, but methodical. I stood, scanning the white blur around me. The snow made everything look like nothing. Just flat white space, no cover, no higher ground, just death waiting for me to stand still. A dark shape emerged ahead, massive, hunched, and moving slow. I ducked behind a jagged sheet of ice. My breath fogged up and disappeared into the storm. The figure stepped closer. 12 feet tall. Thick plated armor fused with organic muscle. Red lights along its shoulder joints. Its arms ended in claws the size of my chest, and in its left hand it carried a metal rod with barbed tips, still wet with blood. Someone else's blood. Maybe one of the other test subjects. Maybe just leftovers from another run. The bastard wasn't a drone. It was breathing. This wasn't just a hunter. It was a hybrid. One of their elite prototypes. I'd heard whispers in the holding blocks about it. The guards used to joke about the executioner. Said it was used when they needed clean kills. No survivors, no messy trails. And they'd sent it for me. I looked down at my body. My shirt was stiff with dried blood. My side still oozed from where the first creature had cut me. My right leg trembled with every step. I couldn't run. I couldn't fight head-on. But I could think. That's the one thing they never understood about humans. We adapt. They engineered strength, speed, and armor into their creatures. We evolved with desperation. The executioner stalked forward, sniffing the air. I knew it could sense me. My blood, my sweat, my heat. So I did something stupid. I ran straight at it, not because I thought I could win, but because nothing throws off a predator like prey that charges. It hesitated just long enough for me to close the distance and duck under its swing. The barbed rod sliced the air an inch above my head. I slammed into its leg with my shoulder. It didn't move. This thing was a wall of engineered hate. I scrambled behind it before it could turn, spotted a cable running from its spine to its neck. An interface. That was the weak point. I leapt onto its back. My fingers barely gripped the slick armor, but I clung on like my life depended on it, because it did. The thing bucked, roaring, spinning in the snowstorm like a beast on fire. It threw me once, almost. My left hand slipped, and I hung by one arm, swinging against its back like dead weight. I grabbed the cable with my teeth. Pulled. It tore loose. The creature froze. Its limbs twitched once, then twice. Then it collapsed into the snow, motionless. I dropped beside it, gasping, coughing blood into my hands. My vision blurred. My legs gave out. I lay there for a long time, unsure if I was dying or just hallucinating from cold and trauma. But I didn't die. I woke up maybe minutes later, maybe hours. Hard to tell in a place where time meant nothing. The body of the executioner was already half buried in snow. I looked up, and there it was again. A drone. Silent, watching, recording. I stood up and stared into its red eye. "You're going to have to do better than that," I muttered, voice cracking from the cold. And then I started walking again. No destination, no plan, just forward. Because that's what survival is. Not courage, not strength, endurance. They'd made a mistake sending me into this simulation. They thought I was broken, expendable, a throwaway human from a planet full of failures. They didn't know where I came from. Back on Earth, I was a dropout, a laborer, a ghost in a mining city no one cared about. I worked the sulfur vents until my lungs burned black. I ate what I could steal. I slept under reactors. And when the off-world recruiters came offering money to anyone willing to contribute to science, I signed without asking questions. I figured death was better than life at the bottom. But now? Now I realized something they hadn't. They thought they were testing me, but I was learning them. Their tech, their patterns, their pride. They built these simulations to crush humans mentally, to make us question our place in the stars, to make us feel inferior. But out here, in this fake Arctic nightmare, all they'd done was give me a playground to unleash everything Earth had buried deep inside me. A third hunter came at nightfall, if you could call it that. The sky never changed, just dimmed slightly. This one was smaller, faster. It moved like a whisper across snow, darting between drifts, using sound to bait me. It made the cries of a child at first, then a woman's scream. Then my own voice, begging for help. I ignored it. I didn't need to see it to know where it was. The snow revealed everything. Even in storms like this, the slightest twitch left a mark. I watched the trail, read the ice, moved slowly, like a wolf stalking another wolf. When it pounced, I was ready. I sidestepped and let it slam into a frozen boulder behind me. It shrieked, stunned, and I came down on it with a shard of ice I'd carved earlier. Primitive weapon. Sure, but I drove it into the side of its skull again and again until its twitching stopped. My arm was soaked in blood. I didn't care. I kept moving. No sleep, no food, just rage keeping me warm. By hour 7, the sky above flickered. Not with auroras, but with static. The simulation was breaking. I don't think they expected anyone to last this long. And I knew then I'd made them nervous. They weren't just watching anymore. They were debating. Do they end the sim? Send in a drone army? Drop a tactical strike and wipe the entire region? Or do they let it play out? See how far the primitive could go? I kept walking. I found a ridge, climbed it, saw what looked like a structure in the distance, some kind of outpost. Could have been a fake, could have been bait. But I didn't care. If it was shelter, I'd take it. If it was another test, I'd beat it. By the time I reached it, I was crawling. Blood trailed behind me like breadcrumbs. I pressed my hand against the steel hatch. It scanned me. Nothing happened. Then a voice spoke. Human. Male. "This is Commander Darren of Observation Deck 6. You're not supposed to be alive." I laughed. Or tried to. It came out like a cough. "Tough luck," I muttered. "You've exceeded simulation parameters by 243%. That's never happened." "Yeah? Want me to apologize?" A pause. "Open the hatch," he said. I fell inside. Lights blazed. Warmth hit me like a truck. I collapsed to the floor, half-conscious. Darren stood above me. He wasn't like the others. No arrogance, no sneer, just confusion. "You're not enhanced," he said. Nope. No augmentations. No gear. You killed the executioner and the siren hunter with ice and fists. That's what happens when you leave a pissed-off human in the cold too long. He didn't laugh, just stared. Then he turned to the control panel and said, "Get the director. Tell him the assets survived." I rolled onto my side, coughing. Asset. That's all I was to them. But something had shifted. I could feel it in the air. And the way Darren looked at me now, not like prey, but like a problem. And I smiled through the blood, because that's exactly what I planned to be. They didn't patch me up. Not really. Sure, they stopped the bleeding, threw me in some sterile med pod, wrapped the worst of my wounds in nanofilm, and gave me enough nutrient paste to stop the shakes. But the moment I stood up, the guards were already waiting outside with stun sticks and a collar. One wrong move, and I was back on the ice. Commander Darren didn't say a word during the whole transfer, just walked behind me as they led me through the narrow halls of the outpost. The place reeked of antiseptic and bad intentions. It wasn't built for comfort. It was built for control. Observation Deck 6. I counted the surveillance drones tucked into every corner. They didn't blink red like the ones in the simulation. These had no color, just black lenses, always watching. Recording every twitch, every breath. They shoved me into a metal chair in a cold interrogation room. No windows, no table, just that chair, bolted to the floor, and cuffs that bit into my wrists the moment I sat down. Then the door opened. And in walked him. I didn't know his name. No one did. We just called him the director. Tall, pale, eyes like frozen oil, black with that glint of synthetic blue underneath. The kind of man who didn't blink unless it was calculated. His uniform didn't have any rank on it, just a silver emblem shaped like a fractured world. He stepped in front of me, hands behind his back, face unreadable. "You broke the simulation," he said. I didn't answer. He tilted his head slightly. "Do you know what that means?" "I pissed off the wrong people," I said. He gave a small nod. "Correct." Silence stretched between us like wire. He studied me like I was a machine that had malfunctioned in an amusing way. "We created that scenario based on the maximum psychological and physiological tolerance limits of over 1,000 known species," he continued. "Every organism broke within 4 hours. You lasted 8. You killed 3 hunters, one of which was designed specifically to break augmented rebels. You made it too easy." That got a flicker of something behind his eyes. Not quite anger, not amusement either. Curiosity. "You were never supposed to make it out alive," he said. "You were a control variable, a baseline." I leaned forward, cuffs scraping metal. "Guess your baseline kicked your Apex's ass." His smile was thin. "Yes, which presents a problem." He circled the chair slowly, like a wolf pacing a wounded deer. "You see, if word gets out that a base model human, no mods, no enhancements, no implants, survived our top-tier simulation, it ruins the entire project. Billions of credits gone. Hundreds of contracts voided. Sounds like a personal problem." He stopped behind me. "No," he said. "It's yours." I felt the cold barrel of a pistol press against the base of my skull, just for a second. A reminder. "I could wipe you out right now," he said. "Say you died in recovery. No one would question it." "Then why haven't you?" Another pause. Then he stepped away, lowered the gun. "Because I'm curious," he said. "You're not special. You're not a soldier. You were a vent worker with a criminal record and a malnourished gene profile." I shrugged. "Guess I was too stubborn to die." "That's not it," he said. "You enjoyed it. The hunt, I saw it in your face. Most beg. Most cry. You smiled when you killed that hybrid. I didn't deny it, because he wasn't wrong. There was something in that moment, when I felt the hybrid's body go limp under my hands, that clicked. A part of me that had always felt small, weak, stepped into the light and didn't back down. "I'm offering you a choice," the director said. "Here it comes. You can go back into the simulation. We'll up the difficulty. Give you supplies this time. Gear. Let's see how far you really go. Survive again, and you'll be upgraded. Housed, fed. No more collar. You'll be an official asset. We'll even pay you. And if I say no?" He smiled. "You go back in anyway, naked, unarmed, with a broken leg." So much for a choice. I didn't answer him right away, just stared at the floor. My reflection shimmered in the polished steel below. Hollow eyes, sunken cheeks, a ghost of a man barely alive. But ghosts have a way of lingering. Finally, I looked up. "Fine, put me back in." He raised an eyebrow. "You're accepting the offer?" "No, I'm buying time." He laughed at that. Actually laughed. Short, sharp, cruel. "Very well," he said. "Let's see how long you can buy." The guards hauled me out, uncuffed me, and this time, they didn't drag me to the drop room. They took me somewhere new, Armory 3. It wasn't much. A basic thermal suit, some rations, a serrated blade, and a modified pulse rifle with 2 battery packs. They handed me a HUD lens to wear over my eye. It would track vitals, temp, and hunter proximity. This wasn't mercy. It was sport. They wanted a better show this time. I suited up in silence. Didn't ask questions. Didn't thank anyone. I just strapped in, checked the blade's balance, loaded the rifle, and waited. Darren showed up again. He stood in the hallway outside the chamber, watching through the glass. "You shouldn't have agreed," he said. "I didn't," I replied. He hesitated, then handed me something. A small chip, looked like a comms slicer. "You'll find an access terminal in the simulation's west quadrant, behind the mountains. If you can reach it, slot that in." "What does it do?" "It sends a signal, untraceable, to a contact in the outer rings. If you make it there, maybe you don't die in this prison." I stared at him. Why help me? He didn't answer at first, just turned to leave. But before he did, he said, "Because I saw your face when you walked out of the storm. You looked more alive than anyone I've ever known in this place." Then the chamber door shut, and I was falling again. Same simulation, same cold. But this time I didn't feel like prey. I hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up on one knee with the rifle ready. Snow howled around me, HUD flickered to life, wind at 64 km/h, temperature -40 Celsius, 2 hunters active, 1 in proximity, 2.4 clicks. I started moving, toward the west, toward the mountains, toward whatever the hell Darren had given me. The cold still bit, but I was numb to it now. This time I wasn't just walking into the storm. I was walking through it with purpose. And whatever was waiting for me in that quadrant, whatever secrets they'd buried behind tech and death and false snow, I'd find it. Then I'd burn this whole place to the ground. I moved fast. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. The HUD was already blinking, red pulse in the upper left corner. A hunter was tracking me. This one wasn't like the others. Its signature flickered on the screen, then vanished, then came back a few degrees to the left. Unstable, or stealth-enabled. Either way, it wasn't here to test me. It was here to erase me. I kept low as I moved across the ice fields, boots crunching into the frozen crust. The cold stabbed into the cracks of my thermal suit, into the cut near my ribs that never really healed. Every breath was shallow, short. The air hurt, but the pain was good. It told me I was still alive. The mountain range lay ahead, black teeth jutting from the white horizon. I couldn't see much, but the jagged silhouettes told me enough. That was the direction Darren had pointed me toward. That was where the hidden terminal waited, assuming it wasn't a setup, assuming he wasn't just another manipulative bastard playing a long con. I kept my hand on the pulse rifle. 2 clicks out, and the tracker went dead. Not a fade out, not a shift, just dead. I stopped. That was never a good sign. The HUD tried to refresh. The red outline blinked, then disappeared completely. And suddenly, I wasn't just cold, I was alone. But not the good kind of alone. Not solitude, predation, the quiet that comes before a strike. I dropped into a crouch behind an ice ridge, rifle up, waited, and there it was, barely a shimmer, slicing through the snow like vapor. The hunter had active camouflage. They'd sent in a stealth variant. Long, low-slung body. 4 limbs. Moved like a panther. Except it wasn't flesh and blood. It was bone and chrome, stitched together with nerve foam and tactical AI. No eyes. Just a long ridge of black glass where its face should be. I held my breath. Then it lunged. I fired once. Missed. It was already on me. We went down in a spray of snow, its claws digging into my shoulder. The thermal suit ripped open. I screamed, not from pain, but from rage. I slammed the rifle stock into its head, but it didn't flinch, just drove its claws deeper. I could feel the edge of bone snap somewhere in my shoulder. Then I remembered the blade. I reached back, grabbed it, and drove it up into the hunter's abdomen. It twitched, let out this mechanical howl like a dying engine. I twisted the blade. It convulsed, then went still. I shoved it off, panting in the snow, shoulder on fire. Couldn't lift my arm anymore. Blood seeped into the ice. The HUD crackled, readings corrupted, battery warning flashing. I was half dead and still 2 clicks from the terminal. But I got up. Because quitting? That's something the simulation was waiting for. I stumbled west. The snow got thinner as I approached the mountains, the air sharper, the cold even worse, like the simulation was pissed I'd made it this far. The terrain shifted from flat plains to jagged rock and ice stairs, slippery, cracked, with deep pits that looked like collapsed tunnels. As I climbed, I saw things, shadows frozen mid-run. Statues? No, corpses, others who'd tried this path. Most were still wearing collars. One even had a pulse rifle frozen into his hands. His jaw was open in a scream that never got out. I didn't stop to stare. I kept moving. The HUD pinged again. Weak signal. Directional. I followed it, weaving through narrow passages carved by ice and wind, until I found a crevice barely wide enough to crawl through. I squeezed in, blade drawn, nerves shot. And there it was. The access terminal. Buried into the stone. Covered in ice. Old, like it wasn't part of the simulation, like it had been here before the hunt even existed. A relic from some older system, maybe from when humans were partners, not lab rats. I pulled the chip from my suit and slotted it in. The terminal whirred. The ice around the screen melted from sudden heat. Lights flickered. Then it spoke. Male voice, human, calm. Access granted, transmitting beacon, encryption secure. A moment passed. Then, transmission complete. I stood there breathing hard. My vision swam. Blood loss, exhaustion, cold. But I did it. Signal sent. Whoever Darren contacted, they knew now. Someone out there knew what was happening inside these simulations. The experiments, the disappearances, the truth. And maybe, just maybe, help was coming. I turned to leave, and found a gun aimed at my face. Not a hunter, not an alien, another human, female, wild hair, scarred face, dirty thermal suit. She looked like she'd been surviving here for months, maybe longer. Her eyes were bloodshot, hollow. "Who sent you?" she asked, voice cracked and dry. I held up my hands slowly. "Name's Ridge," I said. "I was part of the new wave. You?" "Former recon," she said. "Pulled into the sim 9 months ago. I was the first to find this terminal." "You sent the signal?" She shook her head. "Didn't have the chip, but I kept it safe. Waited, hoped." "You Darren's contact?" "No, but I guess I am now." She lowered the weapon, still eyeing me like I might turn into a monster any second. "You survived the hybrid?" she asked. "Which one?" She smirked. "You're the one who killed the executioner, aren't you?" "That's what they're calling it." She stepped closer, offered a canteen. I drank deep, nearly collapsed. She caught me. "We don't have much time," she said. "Now that the signal's out, they'll come." "Good," I growled. "Let them." We moved fast, back into the tunnels. She had a hideout, a cracked bunker from one of the early sim layers. Inside there were maps, notes, equipment scavenged from fallen test subjects. "You're not the first they sent," she said, "but you're the first who didn't break." "I'm not here to survive anymore," I said. "I'm here to burn it down." She looked at me for a long moment, then handed me an old explosive charge. "Good," she said. "Let's start with their comms tower." The explosives were old, pre-simulation tech, heavy, scratched up. One of them had a dent in the casing and a faded serial number that ended in 72. Maybe a production batch, maybe a kill count. Didn't matter. As long as it detonated. The bunker we were in was tight. Metal walls, condensation dripping from the ceiling, power source jerry-rigged from a wrecked drone. The woman, whose name I still didn't know, worked in silence as she laid out a map of the facility's internal systems. She finally spoke. "Name's Rylan." I nodded. "Ridge." She glanced up. "I know." I didn't ask how. Figured if she'd survived this long out here, she had ways. Hidden audio taps, remote cams, maybe just instinct. You don't last long in the Arctic sim unless you get good at reading people and planning 3 moves ahead. Rylan knelt by the map and pointed to a narrow sector deep in the northern ridge. "This is where the main uplink is. The comms tower feeds live data from the simulation to the observation decks in orbit. We take that out, we go dark. They lose control. They won't let that happen. They won't see it coming." She looked at me for a long beat. "You're the wild card now. They're watching, but they don't know who else you've made contact with. That gives us a small window." "How far?" 6 kilometers, through Dead Hollow." That name didn't sound promising. Rylan continued, voice even. "The storm's thickest there, no visibility. Wind can rip gear clean off your back. Ground's cracked and thin. Beneath it, ice caverns. Collapse in the wrong spot, you fall for hours." I stood over the map. "So we avoid the cracks." "We can't. The uplink sits on top of one." She didn't need to say more. We'd be fighting the cold, the terrain, and whatever fresh nightmare they dropped on us the second they caught wind of our plan. "Let's move before my pulse gets picked up again," I said. We geared up. Rylan handed me an upgraded rifle, modded with a longer battery coil and insulated grip, and strapped 2 explosive charges to my chest rig. I could barely feel my left arm from the wound I'd taken in Part 4, but the pain was dull now. The kind you forget when your adrenaline runs hot. We moved out just before what passed for sunrise in this place, just a paler shade of gray in the sky. The wind was already picking up, sand blasting us with fine shards of ice as we crossed the ridge and dropped into Dead Hollow. Visibility dropped to 5 feet. The snow wasn't white anymore. It was gray. Dirty, contaminated by decades of blood, waste, and failed test subjects. We passed half-frozen skeletons wrapped in suits like ours, some still clutching makeshift weapons, others buried up to their waists, faces twisted in expressions no one should die with. "I used to think this was just a program," I muttered, low enough for my breath to fog. "Simulated terrain, clean data, controlled conditions." Rylan kept walking, her voice flat. "It started that way. Then they realized fear and pain give them more accurate reads. So they started dumping real bodies. They started creating them." That hit harder than the wind. I didn't ask more. Every so often, Rylan would stop and press a listening device to the ground. It gave off a low chirp if the ice beneath us was stable, a warning tone if it was cracked. We had to backtrack 3 times in the first kilometer. At one point, we heard something massive moving through the white ahead. Slow, mechanical, deliberate. We froze. I raised the rifle, finger twitching against the trigger. Rylan placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't shoot. That's one of theirs. An observer mech." "Looks like a tank on legs." "It is. Heat-mapped, coded to ignore corpses unless they move. So if we stay still, we stay breathing." We held our breath as the thing stomped by. It had no face, just a black tower for a head, and emitters lining its flanks. At one point it paused, scanning our direction. And I swear it knew. But it turned and moved on, disappearing into the gray like a ghost. We pressed on. At 4 kilometers, we reached the cavern edge. Just beyond it, the uplink tower. It looked like a shard of obsidian stabbed into the earth, buzzing faintly with red lights up the spine. Energy pulsed from the base every few seconds, feeding data back into the system above. We could see the thin outline of an aerial relay dish spinning slowly, covered in frost. But between us and the tower? A field of broken ice, cracked, caved, hollow. Rylan crouched at the edge and pulled a scanner from her pack. "There's a crawl path here, through the tunnel underneath. If we're careful, we plant the charges at the structural column beneath the tower, and it all comes down clean." "Just one problem," I said, nodding toward movement near the base. 2 figures. Humanoid. Not drones. Other humans. But not like us. These ones moved with coordination. Same uniform. Full black armor. Visors lit with HUD feeds, and their rifles were real military hardware, not the overclocked junk we'd been handed. "Enforcers," Rylan whispered. "Security force from the observation decks. They're not part of the simulation." "They're here for us." She nodded. "That signal we sent, they got it too." I checked the battery on my rifle. Half charge, enough for a short firefight, if I didn't miss. Rylan looked at me. "We can take them. Quietly. Or I go plant while you cover." I thought for a second. Then shook my head. "We go together. Kill them first, then plant. No risks." We crept along the cracked edge, using the whiteout to our advantage. The wind screamed overhead, making our footsteps vanish beneath its roar. The first enforcer never saw it coming. Rylan came in from behind, jammed a serrated blade into the joint of his neck plate. He spasmed once, then dropped. The second turned, gun halfway raised. I fired. The shot caught him dead in the visor. His helmet cracked with a spray of sparks, and he tumbled backward into the snow, motionless. I scanned the ridge. No one else. We dragged the bodies out of sight, stripped the charges from their suits, and moved into the tunnel beneath the tower. The wind died instantly. The silence was worse than the cold. It felt like we were walking through a grave. The walls pulsed faintly from the uplink's energy, deep red heartbeats echoing around us. At the base of the tower, Rylan set the charges. "Timed detonation," she said. 60 seconds. As she activated them, I stared up through the grated ceiling. Above us, the tower blinked, still transmitting, still feeding data. Not for long. The second the countdown hit 30, the HUD in my helmet blinked. Signal breach detected. Alert sent to Sector Command. They knew. I grabbed Rylan. We're compromised, go! We sprinted through the tunnels, snow slamming into us as we broke back into the storm. Behind us, the tower began to whine. High-pitched. Rising, like a scream. Then it blew. A blast of fire and shrapnel lit the horizon red. The shockwave hit seconds later, knocking us to our knees. The sky above us flickered, like static on a broken screen. Then the HUD shut off. The simulation was blind. No more tracking. No more AI oversight. Just us and them. We got up, and for the first time since I was dropped into this nightmare, I smiled. They're deaf now, Rylan said, panting. Time to make them bleed too. The fire still burned behind us. Even in the storm, even through the thick, choking snow, we could see the orange-red glow bleeding through the sky. The comms tower was gone. Dust, rubble, shattered black alloy and twisted antenna. Whatever control the observation decks had over the simulation, it died with that explosion. But we knew what came next. Retaliation. They wouldn't send hunters this time. They'd send cleansers. Time to disappear, Rylan said. We headed east, deeper into the ridge, toward a place she called the Bone Hall, an old crash site buried beneath the ice. A ship from one of the early test waves, long abandoned, unreachable to drones and too shielded for orbit surveillance, the perfect ghost zone. We moved fast. My legs burned. My shoulder throbbed with every step, the wound from the hybrid pulsing like it still remembered the claws. Rylan walked ahead of me, her rifle low, jaw tight. She hadn't spoken since the blast. Her face was calm, but I knew what she was thinking. The same thing I was. We crossed a line. There's no going back. 2 hours in, we heard the engines, low at first, then rising, like thunder under the snow. We dropped flat behind a broken ridge. A dropship roared overhead. Black, sleek, no markings. Silent propulsion. Its underbelly opened mid-flight, and a canister dropped. No parachute, just straight impact. A second later, the world flashed white. The ground trembled. Then the screaming started. Not ours. Not human. Rylan looked at me, her voice dead cold. Bioweapons. They're seeding the zone. I'd heard about them. They didn't hunt, they infected. Not to kill, at least not right away. They spread something through touch, breath, heat, something engineered to twist human biology inside out. Not a virus. Worse, a synthetic rewriter. It took your body and turned it into a blueprint for the next stage of the weapon. You didn't just die from it, you became it. We didn't stick around. The Bone Hall wasn't far now, maybe another 2 kilometers. But the terrain changed fast. Ice turned to rock. Cracked plates jutted up like ancient bones, hence the name. Between them, rusted metal ribs. The ship. It looked like a carcass half digested by the earth. Bent frame, shattered hull. Half of it was sunk into a frozen lake. But Rylan found a hatch near the top, buried beneath a mess of debris and snow. We crawled inside. Dark, no power, just cold air and silence. She lit a flare and led the way through twisted corridors and half-melted walls. There were no bodies, just gear, torn suits, knives, helmets, scorch marks, signs of a last stand. This was your group? I asked. She nodded. Recon Wave 1. We weren't told it was a test. Thought we were mapping for colony construction. Then the drones showed up. Half my squad got harvested. The rest went mad. How long you been hiding here? Long enough to hate the quiet more than the storm. We set up in the old control deck. It was barely intact, but it had what we needed. Insulation, cover, and a hardwired port Rylan could jack into. While she worked, I cleaned the blood from my rifle and thought about the ones still trapped out there. The ones like me. How many test subjects had they sent in? How many had they watched die from orbit, calling it behavioral data? Rylan broke the silence. "They're on full lockdown," she said. "I tapped into a low-frequency relay still pinging from the wreck. They've lost visual on the entire western grid." "That's our opening," she nodded. "The next target is the supply uplink. It's not in the sim. It's outside the simulation boundary, but reachable. If we hit that, no more Hunter reloads, no more resets, no more fuel for the fire." I frowned. "How do we get out of the sim?" She looked at me, then opened a panel in the floor. Beneath it, a tunnel. Cold, unlit, leading down into darkness. "I found it months ago," she said. "An emergency maintenance path. They used it during the construction phase. Probably forgot it even exists." "Where does it lead?" "To the service hub beneath the sim wall. We breach that, we're in." "In where?" "Reality." The word tasted strange. I'd forgotten what that meant. We prepped fast. I took extra rations, a few thermal packs, and whatever old grenades we could salvage from the ship's armory. Rylan loaded the last of her pulse cells into her rifle. We didn't talk much. There was nothing left to say. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was revenge. We dropped into the tunnel. The air was thick with moisture. The walls dripped. Metal rusted and groaned as we moved. The floor was grated steel, half frozen, echoing every step. But no alarms, no drones, no hunters. They didn't expect anyone to make it down here. After maybe 20 minutes, the passage opened into a large chamber, part of the foundation layer beneath the simulation field. Pipes lined the walls. Vents hissed. A massive sealed door stood on the far end. I stepped forward, then froze. A red dot danced across Rylan's chest. "Down!" I shouted, tackling her behind a pipe stack. A sniper round tore through the air, sparking off metal. We scrambled for cover. "They stationed guards here," she hissed. "Means we're close." We moved fast, circling wide. Another shot rang out, clipping the pipe inches from my head. Steam burst everywhere. Using the distraction, I flanked the source. Spotted him on a high catwalk. Another enforcer, visor glowing, sniper rifle humming. I didn't hesitate. Tossed a frag grenade up and ducked. The explosion was quick, brutal. His body dropped like a sack of metal. We reached the main door. Rylan started hot-wiring the control panel. Sparks flew. "They're going to know we're here," I said. "They already do." With a hiss, the door opened. Cold air poured in. But this was different. Cleaner. Dry. Artificial. We stepped through and left the simulation behind. The world outside was worse. Sterile. White corridors. No windows. Fluorescent lights overhead. Observation monitors lined the walls. Hundreds of feeds. Every subject. Every zone. Every death. And in the center, a glass chamber filled with command terminals. Observation staff sat frozen, shocked. They hadn't expected to see us walk out of the sim armed. I raised my rifle. One of them reached for a console. I shot his hand clean off. Screams erupted. "Back away from the controls," I roared. Rylan moved fast, locking the blast doors behind us. "No more simulations," she muttered. Then she turned and emptied her rifle into the central command stack. The screens exploded. Sparks flew. The lights died. Just darkness and fire. We stood there, breathing hard, blood and ash coating the walls. That was when the alarm began. Containment breach. Sector Alpha. Engage protocol blackout. Rylan looked at me. "They're going to kill everyone. Wipe the floor clean. Reset the system." I nodded. "Then we don't give them the chance." The sirens howled like dying wolves. Red strobes painted the sterile white corridors in bloodlight as automated shutters slammed down behind us, locking every entrance, every exit. But it was too late for that. We were already inside. Inside the shell of their pristine control center, inside the lungs of the monster they'd built. Rylan and I moved fast, rifles raised, stepping over twitching bodies and sparking terminals. Some of the staff tried to crawl away. One grabbed my ankle, coughing blood through his broken jaw, begging. I kicked him off without a word. No mercy. Not anymore. This place, they called it the Directorate Control Hub, looked more like a morgue built by gods with a taste for white walls and lifeless air. Transparent tanks lined the walls in the next room. Rylan stopped cold when she saw what was inside them. Children. No, not quite children. Test subjects, floating in some kind of stasis fluid, limbs twitching involuntarily, electrodes sunk into their skulls. "Are they alive?" I asked. Rylan stepped closer, checking the vitals. "If you call this living..." Her voice broke at the edges, just slightly. "Early phase simulation links," she said, almost to herself. "Direct neural feed. Their bodies are locked in here, but their minds are burning in the hunt." I stared at them. Little more than skin and wires. Some couldn't have been more than 10 years old. One still had a stuffed animal fused to his chest, half disintegrated from the chemicals. "How long?" I asked. "Long enough that their brains don't know what peace is anymore." Then she did something I didn't expect. She pulled the emergency lever next to the nearest tank. It hissed, drained. The boy inside collapsed to the bottom like a rag doll, peaceful, silent. She did the next one, and the next. I joined her. One by one, we shut them down. Not mercy, not salvation, release. And if that makes me a killer, fine. I'd rather be a killer than a bystander. In the next corridor, we found the armory. It was exactly what we needed. Loaded to the walls with military-grade plasma rifles, scatter guns, thermal charges, EMP darts, and armor exosuits still fresh in their seals. All tagged with barcodes, all organized like this place wasn't hell, but a business. Rylan was already suiting up. "I'm going to breach their uplink servers," she said. "Pull everything. Send it out. Logs, footage, test rosters, subject IDs. We blast it to every public net on the outer rings. No way they cover this up. They'll shut it down before it gets out." She smiled coldly. "Then we jam a blade in their spine and upload it through the back door." I strapped on a new exo rig. Lightweight, reinforced joints, hood built into the visor. Pulse rifle slung across my back, 2 sidearms at my hips. I moved and felt like a weapon. Not a man anymore. A message. "Where's the director?" I asked. She pointed toward the east wing. "Level 6, deep vault. His kind don't run. They watch." I left her with the server team. 5 other survivors Rylan had pulled in from broken corners of the simulation, all of them ex-testers who escaped before the wipeouts. They moved like ghosts. Fast, precise, and cold-eyed. Each of them carried something beyond trauma. Purpose. I took the elevator down alone. Level 6 required a retina scan. I pulled an eyeball off a dead technician and mashed it into the reader. The doors hissed open. Cold light greeted me. And in the center of the vault, calm, untouched, and perfectly composed, stood the director. He was unarmed. He wore the same silver-trimmed suit. His black gloves glistened under the sterile glow. He turned to face me slowly, like I was just another entry on his schedule. "You've come far," he said. "Further than you ever planned," I replied. He nodded, stepping closer. "No guards?" He gave a small smile. "Why would I need any? You won't kill me." I raised my rifle anyway. He didn't flinch. You think this is the heart of the system? He asked. You think I'm the head of the snake? No, I'm just another component. Then I'll start here. He walked to a console behind him, casually pressed a key. The walls lit up with images. Dozens, hundreds, faces, names, videos, children screaming in the snow, men begging for their lives, women buried in mass pits, hunters dissecting their kills, executions passed off as failures, data overlays, heart rate graphs, pain thresholds, the full truth. He turned back to me. You destroy me. You destroy this place, and all this evidence goes with it. Rylan already copied it, I said. For the first time, the director's smile cracked. She's smarter than you, isn't she? She's what you couldn't break, he laughed. Quiet, genuine. I like her. I pulled the trigger. One shot, through the eye. He dropped like a bag of bones. I walked over, made sure he was dead. Then I opened the vault's mainframe and ripped out the core node. The entire floor dimmed. Systems collapsed. Far above, I could hear power shutting down section by section. When I returned to the command level, the place was in chaos. Guards were fighting test subjects. Drones gone rogue were tearing through their own maintenance staff. Alarms blared, backup power flickered, and in the middle of it, Rylan stood on a makeshift platform, uploading the final broadcast. She caught my eye as I entered. Did you kill him? She asked. I nodded. She smiled. Not out of joy, but relief. Then let's finish it. The server completed the upload. And for the first time since I entered this nightmare, I felt something close to silence. Not peace, but victory. Outside the walls, someone would hear what we'd done. Someone would come. Or maybe not. Maybe no one would believe it. But even if they didn't, we burned the truth into history. We walked out of that compound with blood on our hands and fire at our backs. And for the first time since I dropped into that storm, I wasn't prey anymore. I was the storm. We didn't walk out like heroes. There was no cheering crowd, no flags, just cold air, scorched ground, and the silence of something far too big to bury. The facility burned behind us. What didn't collapse in the explosion was swallowed by the storm. Rylan and I stood on the edge of the ridge overlooking what used to be Observation Deck 6, now just a smoldering crater. The walls were gone, the towers down, the snow was turning black. We should have died in there. Everyone expected us to. That was the point, wasn't it? Design a prison no one escapes from. And if someone does, make sure no one believes them. But they couldn't silence us now. The data Rylan uploaded, raw footage, logs, experiments, lists of names and code names, the entire breakdown of the Arctic simulation and the black budget program behind it, it went viral within hours of uplink. We watched it hit the fringe colonies first, then the mining rings, then the outer rim. Broadcasts hijacked, screens glitched with bursts of red snow, and the voices of screaming test subjects. And then the words, "We walked into the storm, and we're still standing. A revolution doesn't start with a war. It starts with one truth no one can look away from." And we had just set it on fire. It took 3 weeks for the Galactic Ethics Tribunal to respond. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of military contractors scrambling to erase files, relocate scientists, bribe governors. 3 weeks where we went into hiding. Rylan set up a mobile outpost in the deep ice caves beyond Dead Hollow. We weren't alone. More survivors found us. Some were escapees from other simulations. Others were smuggled out by insiders, doctors who'd had enough, guards who'd seen too much, engineers who'd watched one too many children die on a monitor. It wasn't a rebellion. Not yet. It was grief. We carried it with us. Every face we couldn't save. Every name in that damn database. We spoke them out loud, one by one. Not because it fixed anything, but because someone had to say them. Rylan never stopped moving, never stopped working. She built field scramblers, encrypted radios, drones made out of scrap metal. She was still bleeding from a wound in her side, but she never let it slow her down. She kept saying, "If we don't stay loud, they'll go back to silence." I understood. I spent most days outside the cave, scouting, watching the sky, thinking about the director, about the faces in the tanks, about who I was before this all started. My name wasn't even Ridge. That was the ID tag they gave me when I signed up for off-world labor. My real name didn't matter anymore. That man died in the snow the day they dropped me from the floor of a cell into a hell built from wind and bone. The man who survived? He wasn't born. He was forged. On the 25th day after the broadcast, we got a signal. A tribunal vessel, unmarked, quiet, fast. They didn't land near the outpost. Didn't announce themselves, just sent a single encoded message. "Come alone. Bring the source." Rylan didn't like it. Neither did I. But we had no illusions. If we didn't face them, they'd face us later, and they'd bring more than just a meeting. We packed up the core data on a drive, double encrypted, laced with a kill switch. Rylan wanted to go, but I told her no. "If it's a trap, they'll kill us both. You're the voice now, I'm just the echo." She hated it, but she let me go. The ship was black steel, no markings, no welcome. Inside, it was silent, sterile. I was taken to a small white chamber with a single table and a single chair. A woman entered, not military, not a suit. She looked plain, normal, average. That made her more dangerous than anyone else I'd faced. She sat down across from me and looked at the drive in my hand. "We've reviewed the data," she said, her voice sharp, practiced. "Your broadcast caused disruption across 34 systems, riots, uprisings, collapse of 3 corporate funding channels." "You're welcome." She didn't react. "You're not supposed to be alive," she said. "Been hearing that a lot lately." She leaned forward. "Do you want justice, or do you want war?" "Same thing, some days." "Don't test me." I slid the drive across the table. "People know now. You can't put it back in the box." She picked up the drive, didn't plug it in, just held it. "What do you want?" she asked. "Full shutdown. Arrest every name in that chain of command. Free every subject still wired into those death machines, and blow every lab off the map." "And if we don't," I stood, "then I'll keep going, and I won't be alone." She looked at me, eyes calm, calculating. "You're a problem," she said. "No," I said. "I'm the solution you don't want to admit you need." They didn't kill me. That was their first mistake. They let me walk off that ship with no chains, no collar, and no bullet in the spine. And that was the day the movement went from story to storm. They started trying to control the narrative, of course. Called us terrorists. Said the footage was faked. Said the simulations were voluntary hardship immersion training. Said the deaths were data mishandling. But no one bought it. Not anymore. Too many survivors were talking. Too many ghosts were rising from under the ice. A year passed, then another, and now we're everywhere. Rylan leads the network from the fringe. I train the ones who come to us broken. We don't wear uniforms, we don't wave flags, we don't ask permission, we just remember. What it felt like, what they did, and how we made them pay. They call me the man who walked into the storm and came out on fire. Let them. Because if that's what it takes for the next bastard to think twice before torturing another soul for data, then the fire was worth it. I didn't survive to live. I survived to burn it all down. And I'm not done yet. Not until the last simulation falls. Not until the last hunter rusts. Not until no one is dropped into a blizzard and left to die for the amusement of cowards in orbit. I am Ridge, or whatever name they gave me. And I am still walking, through every storm they throw at me. And beyond.